welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in the Inmendum, or something like that. Whatever. So some conversation about, why people believe what they believe. The fact that it's more complicated maybe than just some sort of mathematical equation. You just figure out how to do multiplication or something and you figure out that this is how the numbers work out. It seems people are much more affected in what they think or what they approximate or what they sense. They don't really do that clinical kind of what's the right answer. They do a kind of, does it look okay? Does it feel okay? Does it fit with the other crap I'm wearing? So speaking of wearing, a little piece of whatever they call this kind of crap organizationally. The antinatalism podcast logo. Anyway, which the whole organization thing is something that's come to my awareness, and so something I've been thinking about. Just because you see what happens to organizations, it's a little bit messy. The current politics, you could say that the method somehow ends up in, some kind of good thing ends up being a bad thing. Pointing out something like, cops aren't doing their job quite right, and that turns into, I'm going to burn down your house because I'm protesting. It gets kind of ridiculous. So somewhere in all the crap, that turns into people organizing, it turns into some ugly, horrible, again, the fringes take over, the aggressive types, the less cautious, the risk takers, and they just make a mess out of everything. Kind of like the trolls on the internet. They get to decide agenda so often just because they're just so aggressive and obnoxious, and they really just don't care about how careful they don't really have a plan or a strategy. It's just whatever compels them at the moment to think is a good idea when they're really not good ideas. They're really not decent tactics. They're really not winning. It's just throw rocks and hope that your rock hits the right thing. And it's as if they're just not paying attention, that there's just as likely that their rock is going to go astray and do something totally useless. So, it's just another conversation about how difficult it is to communicate with people about, rational risk assessment and, getting through our lives in some efficient, constructive way, and, having a civilization that makes that possible by having, paved streets and sidewalks that are manageable and all that kind of stuff. This little bit of infrastructure we need not to make a mess. But people will make a mess. I was watching a tin can somebody threw out their window, right? Just threw their tin can out the window. And it was a windy day, and I was just watching it bouncing down the road, and it's making this tin sound, which is just kind of funny. But it was just such a symbol of the sloppiness of people and how much they just couldn't care less. And, about managing their life in some sort of rational way. They just don't care. It just doesn't occur to them to worry about any of that. It's me first and me only, and and that's as far as it just doesn't go any further than that. Their brains just don't function on any other, they just don't have any inhibitions regarding embarrassing themselves or looking like an ass or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, I've mentioned this FedEx thing before. I mean, it's really funny that, when I mentioned how their trucks are always making this obnoxious, rap music bullshit with all these, N words and slut and whore and, the whole variety flying out of their trucks. And it really hasn't happened lately. So, so I was like, whoa, I made that video and it, the trucks have been very polite lately. But yesterday one was just outrageous. I mean, it was so loud that, I was listening to a video and on the porch and I couldn't hear it anymore. It was just so loud. It was coming off the street and it was so loud it was impossible to listen to anything. Like if I was on the phone or something, there'd be no way to have the conversation because the FedEx guy was on the street. And it was just, you're just like, how could this not, he just has no idea. It doesn't even occur to him. He can't even talk to somebody like he actually, because I was there. I went to the sidewalk to get the, save him the steps and to get the package. And he was delivering more than one. Anyway, it's like it didn't even occur to him that, we couldn't have had a conversation, couldn't have said anything because his truck was making so much fucking noise. And so anyway, so you're trying to have a conversation with people about what's right and wrong and decent and all this kind of stuff, and they can't even figure this shit out. You're just like, whoa, this is really a challenge, to come up with a strategy to, convey in video form or in language or in words, what it is to be a nice person. What it is to do your job, so to speak. Even that, doing your job. I mean, you're representing a company, you have an interest in helping your company look good, and, they don't, that doesn't even occur to them. Like they have some self-interest or even job interest in, not having somebody call FedEx and say, that fucking truck was really annoying. Not only are they playing crap music, okay, I mean, obscene, the human degrading nonsense crap, I mean, absolute crap is coming out of their truck, but it's coming out of their truck so fucking loud, I can't even, sit in my yard, on my house, on my property, without having it disrupted for 3.5 or 4 minutes while first he figures out what packages he's delivering and then scans them or does whatever the fuck else he's doing and rearranges his truck with that shit coming out of it. So it was just, it was just an example. That's all. I'm just using these as examples. I'm not saying the whole fucking human race is an asshole, but I'm just saying there's enough of it where, wow, it surprises me. I guess that's all I'm saying. I didn't really see this part of America, until I moved. You heard about it, sort of, but you didn't really see it. And seeing it is quite different. I mean, it's in your face every day. So, anyway, and you're just saying, so how do you have a conversation? How do you even start a conversation with people this belligerently clueless? Just not even close. To having an axiom, a fundamental philosophy that's, where we have anything in common almost. So that's the challenge, and part of the problem is, from my perspective, is that, obviously I didn't need to be convinced. Somebody didn't need to explain to me or show me a picture or talk about risk awareness and the rational approach of recognizing these bad probabilities, the bad odds that you're living your life through, and all of that kind of occurred to me rather young, and so I was thinking, those experiences, some of them I've talked about, but just the death thing came. I internalized it. First, you're here, that's the story, okay? You hear about people dying, and here you're going to die, and they tell you this, and you're like, well, that doesn't seem like a very good deal. And then they get, they always wash it in some religious crap. It's God's plan. It's blah blah blah. Don't worry about it. And you're like, well, frankly, all that's a story. So I mean, I can't. I'm not really falling for that. So I'm going to worry about it because it seems kind of an important thing. When and how I'm going to die seems kind of important. Um, what the hell's going to happen to me and all that kind of crap. So anyway, I had a lizard, a pet lizard. It just had one of those half garage things, and he used to just sun himself on the ledge, and I'd throw him a bug here and there and all that kind of crap. And he was even tethered, for a while. Well, anyway, the neighbor just squished him, thought they were doing us a huge favor by getting rid of a pest, and so, I buried him because that was what you was told the thing you do is you have to bury the dead things. And but curiosity got the better of me, and I had to know what happened to my lizard friend, and I was damn curious about this whole process. And you see that he first dries up, and and then you come back another month later and dig him up, and he's just turned into more just bones and crud. Frankly, it wasn't very good information. It didn't give me much of a feeling of, wow, this is just great. What a great plan. No, it didn't seem very good at all. And then all the other stuff, is the context, is the, lots of ants, lots of bugs, lots of stuff to observe living and dying and being manipulated and being exploited and being exterminated and all that crap right in front of you. And I certainly didn't relate to. I certainly could see that bugs weren't doing what I was doing. I mean, they weren't holding up signs saying "Help me." They weren't even speaking a foreign language, like you could say they're communicating or they're having a human experience. So I got that part, but I didn't get the part where it's something totally benign, like they have no welfare interest and they're just little machines that don't feel anything and don't have anything to worry about. I just had the understanding that they're not smart enough to worry about anything. But not that they didn't have anything to worry about. There's plenty to worry about. The life and death was real. And so for me, this all looked quite sloppy and, didn't look like a good plan at all, like there was any plan, that this was just chaos and you're supposed to navigate this mess of jeopardy. And so I was, at 6 years old, you could have had a conversation with me about, well, we're planning on, ending the living infestation on Earth. And I would have said, yeah, it's probably a good idea because this looks really stupid. It's just dangerous and everything's all a mess and things are eating each other and the whole plan doesn't make any sense at all, So, so that sort of relates to these kind of logo. I don't, this doesn't say much to me, frankly, personally. I'm not a big, I know you have to have the word has to get tied to things, but I'm not a big fan of the anti-natalist word. I sort of invented ephilism for a reason, just because I was kind of uncomfortable with this notion that the only thing happening on Earth is, humans are, watching baseball games or whatever they're doing, chasing some sort of candy of some kind, looking for their gratification, throwing their cans out the window. I don't agree that that's the only thing happening on planet Earth. I don't think that's even close to an accurate description. So, so I was just thinking of logos and, the fish eating the fish, eating the fish, eating the fish, the small fish, and maybe putting the word life in there somewhere with a red line through it, something a little more of a statement about this is just consumption. And it's not a good word. It's a disease, consumption. It's and that's the simple argument. That is, as much as you can argue that while I'm here, I'm hungry and I'm horny, I can understand. That's just a little kid chasing his Christmas presents. I mean, it just doesn't go anywhere. It will not end well, and it's it's just a reoccurring condition, of psychology, and it doesn't have anything to do with being smart, because a smart thing isn't going to play a dumb game. And I've said that 4 million times, but that's what this is. And the older you get, the more you can know that. And obviously, I had argued that if the game was played in reverse, if you had kids, 3 days before you were going to die, you'd play the game differently. And certainly all the other animals, if they had any awareness of what they're getting themselves into, like by swimming upstream, they're going to die to lay eggs, they'd say, fuck laying eggs. Okay, I'm not going to do that. And so it's people that don't have any perspective who have kids, and they have no life experience. They haven't seen enough. But the part that seems curious to me is, how could they avoid seeing enough? I mean, it's all around you. The jeopardy, the lack of control that you have. I don't know why they feel like they're in control. Why do they sense they're in control? Why do they sense that they can handle whatever comes along? Why do they have this impression when it's so obvious that most of the people all this crap happens to aren't controlling things well at all? They seem very vulnerable, and they seem very capable of falling into the quicksand, sinking, and dying. And why do you think you're going to walk on it? You're just going to hop over it. You're going to somehow evade it with your whatever I'm great plan. It's just really funny. So this sort of came up in a physics context, the other channel, just because a very popular physicist sort of made a philosophy video explaining, from his perspective, from this, I don't even know the point exactly, right? It's just some sort of message about how we all should be understanding, and that us winners should appreciate that, we were lucky. And so the argument was sort of just explaining or showing how it's not about you necessarily. So that part was good. But the bad part was, the conclusion was, you have to live as if you're right to think you're going to be lucky, and because that'll give you the aggressiveness needed to succeed, because you have to be aggressive to succeed. And that's sort of the lesson, and that's sort of how it works in life, is this aggression thing. You first one to the table gets the most food kind of bullshit. And a rational person would say, well, you ought to fix that. You shouldn't sit there and say, let's all stupidly endorse systems that don't really work, where you create more losers than you're creating winners, and pretending the losers just don't matter. Clearly pretending. And you're thinking you're not going to be one of them. You're immune, and there's no good reason to think that. No good reason to believe it. So anyway, these are all reasons to be cautious, at least. And I'm not saying you should be pessimistic, but that's not very useful. But there's reason to doubt that this is necessarily efficient enough, or that this can be made efficient enough. That there aren't always going to be wars, and there aren't always going to be tragedies and catastrophes and 500-year floods or some other kind of crap that's going to cause horrible grief and suffering and unpleasantness. And that some amount of that has to be too much for everybody. I mean, everybody has to agree there's too much. I mean, it's too bad. Too much of that is happening. Too many bad lives and then bad deaths. There has to be a volume I can describe where I'm saying that the conditions just aren't good enough, and you can see this doesn't work. The boat has too many holes in it, whatever the analogy is going to be. And I would argue any hole means this thing isn't going to sail very long. It's not made to be enduring. You can't really make anything out of it. So these are all, I don't want to get into the specific arguments because I've been over and over those. So the real argument is how to convey life lessons. So again, that goes back to even the Veritasium argument, where he's sort of making an argument, but he's making it, it's kind of an indirect argument, by example argument, by stick figure play. Show stick figures, do something to demonstrate that if you saw this as a reality, that you'd say, this isn't too good. That doesn't work. Not good enough. So yeah, you could argue that the way to do it is through a movie, or through, and trying to do it quickly. That's the tricky part. I mean, some quick thing. Quick. There. Do you get it? Do you fully understand? That's the hard part. Is conveying understanding in these little bits, little Twitter statements or something. There's lots of great quotes in the world, lots of stuff that you could say, not Mark Twain, I can't remember the exact statement, but, the lucky ones are the ones that, died before birth. Stillborn, they're the winners. As they didn't, have to go through this process of recognizing just how messy their life has been, how sloppy it is, how, there's so much of it I could have done better, and you're just stuck because you don't get to do this redo thing where you can, be one thing is, it's just the whole dying thing too. It's another word, dying. Well, who cares? So I saw an episode of some old show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents or something, and in some episode they were emphasizing like somehow people who commit suicide or something are afraid of being dead, and it's not the process of dying that's, the inhibiting factor. And it was just so reverse to me. It just didn't make any sense. The dying thing is the tricky part. Certainly you can have some apprehension about being dead, but it's not nearly as visceral or real as, spending your last moments terrified or in terrible pain, or going through some terrible process because you didn't do it right, that you're dying in some ugly, horrible, squirmy convulsion way, rather than in some peaceful way. And so it's, these are sort of interesting questions in terms of, what compels people to live is, are they running from the deprivation, and what's their definition of the deprivation, what scares them, I suppose. And you would think it would be pretty common, like everybody be sort of afraid, of these horrible things that can happen to you in terms of something goes physically wrong and you have to go through these, horrible experiences, physical experiences. And so we should have some common ground, some common place to argue from, and that those, those realities are so bad that some of them are just not worth risking at all. I mean, it's almost, if one person has to go through that, I wouldn't impose it. I certainly wouldn't vote for whatever you're doing and it costs that. If it costs that, well then forget it. It's not worth it. And that's sort of a simple mathematical equation, a certain, seems just kind of obvious. And so if I could spell out what the human race accomplishes by, balancing on its tightrope and successfully doing it, and having their little moments of love, or whatever, you know, their moments of gratification, or ego satisfaction, or whatever you want to call it. Their happy meal, their double chocolate ice cream, or whatever. Is it really worth that? Is that good enough to say, yeah, let's pay this huge price for it? So anyway, some of the arguments do seem rather simple. The fish eating the fish thing, simple. It's just so, ooh, that's not a good idea. Who invented that? I mean, who thought that was a good plan? They should be eating rocks or something, and breaking the rocks down chemically, and getting their energy that way. I mean, they shouldn't be, ripping other living things to pieces to steal their batteries. That's shit. That sucks. But anyway, so this does get sort of back to the fundamental argument, like all these, whether we call ourselves anti-natalist, or call ourselves aphilist, or call ourselves this or that, what are we really opposing? And I guess my argument is from my perspective, the biggest enemy is the fable that whitewashes it all, religion, some sort of silly story that somehow humans are something other than evolved machines. And I guess the other part of that would be is all the bullshit that choose to aggrandize what you are and why you are. I am who I am because I had a pet lizard. It's just a truth, okay? And that I had interactions with other little creatures on Earth that taught me life lessons and gave me reason to doubt my security. And that's just a fact. I mean, if it wasn't for those encounters, I probably wouldn't be the same person. That's just the truth. If you could eliminate those little tiny events, those little moments when you're sitting there with the magnifying glass and you have the choice to fry the little ant, or and then the thought occurs to you, what the fuck am I doing? Why the fuck would I do that? That's really stupid. Yeah, it's fun to watch things blow up and pop and do all that kind of crap, but why would I ruin an ant's day? I mean, it's already got it rough. It's already got this pretty terrible Borg life of work. I mean, it doesn't look like it's having any, they're not playing baseball. They're not doing anything fun. It just looks like all they do is work, nag each other, work, nag, work. Why the fuck would I fry the little poor sucker? I mean, he's already, in shit, and I'm just going to pile more shit on him. So I'm just saying that occurs to you, and you're done. You're done playing the game. You're done saying it's all okay, it all doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. And you start to measure everything you're doing and saying, well, I'm walking around with a bunch of magnifying glasses that I really don't see. And every time I look at something or I want something, I'm maybe frying some poor ant. And, the ant's another human being, but I'm just saying it's same difference in my opinion. You're fucking with things, you're changing things, and that's a hell of a responsibility. And so if that's what if you had to walk into that, if you had to contract for it, again, that would be a good analogy to get people to understand that if, it's on you. So when you're pro-life and you're pro all this stuff, the contract should be is that, well, if you're going to take responsibility for what exists and basically say continue to let it exist, you're going to oppose the forces that would stop it, then you have to take responsibility for it, and then you should have to witness, or maybe you should have to be the actual person who injects the 6-year-old kid with cancer and runs over the cat on the street and throws the kitten into the snow. You should have to do it. I mean, if you're going to defend the system that's doing it, then you should be willing to be an active participant in the effects and what actually is going to happen, because you're endorsing it. You're saying it's okay. Well, so it should be part of your life experience. Instead of having fun doing fun things, you should spend some time actually having to witness the actual consequences of your vote, of you raising your hand. Ah, I'm pro-life. Well, then you're also pro-death, okay? And you're pro all the ugly and horrible ways it happens. You're defending it, you're endorsing it, you're perpetuating it by voting for it, by advocating for it, by resisting those who make an effort to stop it. Then you have to take responsibility for what you're doing, what you're causing, what you're going to make in the world. So you should have to eat it. You should have to taste it and know what it is. That's the annoying part, right? Because, yeah, no, it's the people who want to stop it are the ones who are aware and who see it easily, who recognize every time they see the cat, walk across the street, that his days are numbered and that his life is hard and brutal, and they have some appreciation for what's being paid to have your street and to have your civilization, and to be cheap about it, to be irresponsible, to allow people to have their pets and to do all their stuff and not care about how much waste that process creates and how much jeopardy it puts other animals in. And if that was the bargain, if you could force a person to have to deal with that as the implication that it's on you, then maybe they would they'd be a little squeamish, and they get a little bit uncomfortable in their chair and have a hard time refuting the evidence that they're sadistic, glib scum. That they are imposing in this horrible, awful way for nothing but to perpetuate a dumb idea of fish eat fish, eat fish, eat fish. It's just stupid. Evolution. It's so again, this always comes back to that's got to be the core understanding. I mean, if there's some other reason you're against human beings replicating, then against it because it's just the human version of the evil that's happening in nature. But clearly there'd be no point in me belonging to an organization that has a bunch of people in it who want to abandon the entire animal kingdom. They just want to get rid of the humans and give the earth back to the fish eating the fish, eating the fish, eating the fish. I mean, you just can't get more stupid. I mean, they actually believe, I guess, that cavemen, if we went back 100,000 years when humans were functionally not much better than animals. I mean, they weren't doing anything more complicated than what a tribe of chimpanzees were doing. They wouldn't care. They would just leave them out there to eke out an existence in this brutal, hard, unfair world, where they all get the electric chair, and they all get killed, and punished essentially for existing. They just let that go on and on and on and on and on and not be concerned at all. I mean, that's just crazy. Because obviously, from my perspective, that the thing doing that isn't any different than the thing you are. So I guess, again, this whole idea is that I guess there's people who they have actually, changed reality enough where they think they're completely different. Like they're doing something completely different. I am completely different than you are, not a little different than you are, not just a little philosophically different or a little bit, life experience. No, I'm completely different. You're a stupid thing that can go ahead and be tortured, and I am not. Yeah, it's important if I get tortured. It's not really that important if you do. I don't know how they can maintain a delusion that silly, so disconnected from what you can understand the reality to be. So, yeah, so organization is a tricky thing. Um, I have some view that I would like to have something very, it's just like politics, something that's just very platform, relevant. It doesn't have any social elements. It doesn't have any, mob elements. It would just have this idea that you're all working towards a cause and you make contributions to make the cause more functional. That is, it has, it has graphics, or it has a plan to, put in a few ads. It has a platform. It writes, and like some kind of Wikipedia, everybody sort of works at editing it and making it better, and you kind of, you vote on things and you figure out how to make it stronger and more effective. That just doesn't involve the sloppiness that organizations run by individuals can have, and organizations run by a club or a hierarchy that isn't necessarily functional. That aren't. There isn't enough thought or discipline gone into agenda, and so it just ends up being too sloppy, I guess is the word. Yeah. So, so there's, lots of approaches. I mean, and everything is just so tainted, I mean, you have to function, even just this whole idea that I'm still making YouTube videos, even though I despise Google and despise these corporations and the mess they're making of our lives. But you have to play along. You have to play on the field that's provided. There's no other grass. Effectively. Especially with Google in control of the internet. It's not like you can just go off onto the internet somewhere, because Google's still controlling your exposure. Their agenda is the populist agenda, and popularity breeds popularity. Whatever the popular people like, they get to join the popular club. That kind of bullshit. So there's just so much that's broken, so much that doesn't work. So I mean, you could certainly make an argument that human civilization needs a pause button. It needs to figure out where it's going. I mean, it has these real problems where, it's based its economy on unsustainable growth, and that won't work, so it has to be fixed, because, someday in the future they have to fix it. And it can't be a bad thing. Ending growth in population has to be a good thing, not a bad thing. And it's going to be a bad thing, if you have a whole economic system dependent on exploitation, of the new generation has to pay for the old generation kind of nonsense. So obviously somewhere this thing has to pay for itself. It can't keep paying the bills on the promise that I'll make you more slaves tomorrow. That's stupid. Doesn't work. So there's lots of these structural things that you got to fix, or you got no future. In terms of it's still going to be bleak and rough and horrible and messy and sloppy and all those things unless you fix it. And nobody seems to want to fix anything. All the other agenda, that would have something to do with improving the human condition, all of these organizations seem incredibly dysfunctional. They waste so much of the resources, just on running the charity kind of argument. The charity spends 80% of the money, soliciting money, and 20% goes to the cause, and the cause is so vague that it doesn't do any good often. Like feed the hungry, just that doesn't work all by itself. You can't just feed the hungry. You can't just give people. You have to give in incentive ways. It's like the governor here is planning on some, giving kids, instant money at birth. and like a little bank account. Yeah, it's a great idea is if you make it tied to something. Like, you'll get the money when you're 18, but you only get it if you don't break the law and you don't do, and you graduate from high school and you do some certain minimum decency things, good citizen things. And if you don't do those things, you're not going to get your money. That would give people an incentive to think about it when they go out and drink and drive or go out with their buddies and, do some mayhem. They would be thinking about that. It'd be a good thing to have in their head that, oh, I do actually have something to lose. They wouldn't be as reckless because there would actually be something they gave a shit about. Which is, gee, I'm going to lose a big pile of money, aren't I? I'm going to lose I'm going to lose something. And, that would be a huge incentive in terms of giving people reason to invest in their civilization. Is if, they were going to actually have their life diminished. Okay. They had something to lose by fucking up somebody else's day. So those are simple things, right? I mean, those are things I think if you implemented it tomorrow, if you made it $50,000, you could guarantee a lot better behavior. Because, yeah, we know my psychology as a kid understood. As soon as you know what a quarter is and a dollar and all that kind of crap, and they can buy you some joy and happiness in your life, a little bit of candy or a little bit of this or a little bit of that, you're going to think in terms of understanding that if my self-interest is tied to your self-interest, then I'm all of a sudden going to be a good friend. And, we create the exact opposite kind of reward and punishment system. So these are really simple things, and people can't get those. They're really free almost. They'll pay for themselves kind of thing. They really don't require any huge sacrifice. And they don't get done because people are just anti-government or they're anti-this or anti-that. They naysay, they nitpick, they find every excuse to evade fixing anything. It's like the teachers union, this whole coronavirus, and they're just playing the game so they don't have to go back to work, and they're just terrible freeloaders. They get we already know that the technology can do 95% of their job. That I would say 100%, but whatever. I think a reasonable person would have to accept that yes, most of what they're doing is just redundant performance art, and you just show the movie. You don't have to show the live performance. It's just useless. And anybody who, I just don't think how anybody honest could say that the people who asked questions in the classroom or did any of this, that helped at all. That was the key to your whole education, was the interruptions. No, I don't think so. Okay, that's just bullshit. And if you don't understand, you get a private tutor. No big deal. I'm just saying that it's all just performance art. It's just a waste. I've talked about this. I had a channel devoted to it. Nobody could give a shit. But there's huge money to be saved. There's huge resources to use better, and none of those things can even get off the ground. 30 years ago, there was a bunch of people organizing to prevent deficit spending. Just because they knew this is just credit card bullshit. All right, somebody's going to have to pay for this, and it's not going to be any fun. They could see the obvious that this was just enslaving the future, and it didn't get anywhere. It disappeared entirely. It's, I can't even remember the names of the groups, and so everybody just bought into this lie that everything's, no, this will work, this is fine, So yeah, organizing sounds like, oh yeah, that's what you need to do, but frankly, there's lots of examples of how it just doesn't work, and I suppose finding the ones that do work, the ones that have succeeded, and trying to find out what they had as a minimum. Mothers with drunk driver, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, comes up as an example of a success, and was it didn't have any bells and whistles to it. It's kind of a simple enough message. And maybe that's all it was. It was just so obviously, you could just show the picture of the crippled kid, and it wasn't too hard to explain how, gee, we shouldn't let this happen for no good reason. But then the other example is there's no, Mothers Against Pee Wee football. They haven't been able to get anywhere. They can't get any traction. Mothers Against all the stupid, inane, crazy risks that people take. Mothers for child safety seats. That seemed to work. You got legislation. I don't know if, hard to say, again, whether the people that need them are using them. I don't know at what rate. But the whole, what's the point of the child safety seat when you're dangling the kid over, all kinds of spiders and, centipedes and all kinds of doom, in so many other respects. It's like, why bother? Because the poor little thing is statistically fucked. In terms of it's going to turn out like most people, and again, I'm just make the argument. Most people look at other people and they don't go, "Oh man, that guy's so cool." Oh wow, that she's so No, they don't do that. They're like, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not them. Oh, I'm glad I'm not as dumb as they are. I'm glad I'm not as fat as they are. I'm glad it's not as, That's what they're really doing. And they don't understand that they're in that same boat from the other side, So, anyway, so this is stuff I've been thinking about it for years. What's the best approach and blah blah blah. And so I kind of think of like the infomercial thing is now big. I mean, radio, right, is all infomercials now, right? I mean, it's all just pretending to do a show, and the show is really about selling the product. It's not. There's no. You know what I mean? It's really the product show, and we give you some little. We'll tell you what the capital of Bangladesh is or something. I guess Bangladesh is probably has a capital, maybe. It's a little, hovel of some kind. Anyway, but they're giving you something and calling it news or calling it this, but it's really just to sell the product. So you just buy the time, and the ad generates money to make more ads. Now the downside is who wants to pay all these useless capitalists, pay the Googles of the world and all this other stuff. I mean, screw that. So that's the downside, is they get a big giant piece of the money, for you to collect the 20% that you can glean out of the deal. You get the small piece of the pie, even though you're supposed to be getting the pie. So, but that's the world we created. I mean, we created a world where you got to spend money to make money, kind of bullshit, and it's, terribly inefficient. You got to bribe so many, you got to grease so many wheels, that, your grease costs are so high, so there's so little profit margin because you only get this 20% to play with because you got to pay 80% of your bills or grease. Which is bullshit. So, but whatever. The idea would be is you have some self-financing, self-perpetuating thing, something that replicates itself through its own success. Something like that as a mechanism. Something simple, you just give it a push and it just keeps going on its own, It finds its own fuel to keep going and making more copies, like an evolution almost. So anyway, try to think of these efficient ways of doing something where you don't have to do it, where you introduce as little noise and risk of at least complicated So there's less to go wrong, I guess is the point. Just trying to find some way to prevent it from failing. Try to eliminate the sources of failure, the weaknesses of organization. But anyway, that's just a whole side subject. You know, this is all just, you gotta bang the steel and do all this, you gotta make this product, you know, which is an argument. And again, I argue for 10 years I've been trying to, you know, I've been working it, you know, working the idea of what you have to do to make the compelling arguments, or, you know, to be interesting enough and to be persuasive and all that stuff. And, you know, I found all the ways you can do it and fail. So I've sort of shown that it's not as simple as just making the argument and all that kind of crap. But some of that I already knew. So it's time to turn it into something. It's time to turn the draft part into a final part, into something that works, you know, more effectively. And so that's a challenge, because I really haven't. I just learned what doesn't work. I haven't learned too much about what does work, and which is seeing the world that works is, you know, stuff that doesn't really work. Yeah, you get a mob, but the mob doesn't end up doing what you wanted to get done, and that's the same as failure. It looks like you won, but you didn't really win, kind of thing. That's sort of where the politics is now. You know, you just can't win. You know, the good guys are too stupid, and you know, and the bad guys are bad guys. So you just don't have anything to vote for. You don't have much hope of that working. So anyway, yeah, that's probably enough of a video. So sorry, haven't made greatest video ever made. I haven't gotten there yet. Working on it. I can say I'm doing that. I feel like I'm getting somewhere. I sense it somewhere inside of me that, you know, focus is clearing. You know, that's sort of it. You're fucking with a lens that just doesn't want to focus. And but I have this sense that, you know, if I keep fiddling with it, there will be a place that works. And I just have to find it still. Well, anyway, that's, you know, yeah. I can't be good at everything. Yeah, so maybe that's just part of it too, is that you have to have enough energy from, you have to organize at least, you know, not a mob, but you have to have people who have enough, you know, you have to have a guy who's good at rowing, and then a guy who's good at steering, and then a guy who's good at navigating. You know, you have those things on airplanes, navigators and pilots, and, you know, so there might be some part of it that's like that. You know, it's going to take more than one skilled individual, okay, to manage this machine. You know, there's enough moving parts that it needs, you know, somebody to work the legs, and somebody to work the antennas, and somebody to work, you know, you get it. But anyway, whatever. Yeah, I'm in the process. You know, I think there's evolution, I guess is all I'm saying. I don't think I'm going to stagnate in this. But even if I did, it wasn't nothing. Yeah. So, but we'll see. Hopefully I can turn it into something more powerful than, you know, the few hundred views I get But anyway, till the next time.